This glorious land of liberty will remain ours. Liberia will rise again. U.S. Ambassador Mccarthy is already here. And we're just going to give you a minute to sit up and then we can begin the show. So those of you following us from in and outside of the country, we'll talk Liberia-America relations. We'll talk a lot of issues. Radio Smart FM in Zwedu, Grand Jira County is relaying this edition of the show this morning because of its importance. Just keep on. And so we will wind down the music and the ambassador is on time, and so we too have to be on time. Welcome to the OK Morning Rush on 99.5 OK FM from Liberia's capital, Monrovia. We have of us here U.S. Ambassador accredited in our country, Mccarthy, and we will talk about some of the issues. I see Councillor Arthur Johnson writes about the situation concerning the Minister of Justice and the Solicitor General. We'll talk that later. But let's bring on the U.S. Ambassador. And then we can begin to talk about some of the issues we will be talking about today. Lot of issues to talk about. We'll talk about priorities of the current U.S. administration for Liberia. U.S. government's stance on corruption in our country and measures, to ensure deterrent. Recently released the 2021 U.S. State Department Human Rights Report on our country. We'll also talk about 2023 general and presidential elections and justice and the rule of law and COVID-19 issue, usage of road maintenance funds and all these kinds of issues with the ambassador. Mr. Ambassador, good morning, and on behalf of the management here, I want to say we're grateful for having you here today.
Good morning, Clarence, and thank you so much for you and OKFM for inviting me this morning. It's always great to get out of Monrovia into Liberia, and it's always great to get out of the office and actually talk to Liberians. So thank you for inviting me.
It's a great pleasure. Now, is this your first public radio appearance since you took over as ambassador of our country?
It is not. It's my second, but the first was within a month of my arrival. So I think you're getting a better deal.
I like that. Every time we hear, from the day you were appointed and to your confirmation, you spoke at the Congress before coming here. A lot of people being, looking out to see who Mccarthy is. But for the benefit of the Liberian population and people listening in and outside the country, just 2-3 minutes and talk to us a little bit about yourself.
Well, who am I? I guess I would say I am the son of a diplomat. I grew up overseas. I grew up in Syria, Lebanon, Pakistan, and Morocco. I'm the youngest of 7 children. I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Togo. When I did live in the United States, I've always lived in Washington, D.C., except when I was visiting my parents after they retired, or when I went to university, which was in New Orleans in Louisiana. So all those things have had their impact. And I'm now wrapping up my 32nd year in the Foreign Service.
42nd year.
32nd.
Three.
Three.
3-2. Wow. Meaning you've spent 32 years in working as a diplomat?
That's right. And I've been very fortunate. I've had the fortune to live all over the world. So, but just by happenstance, not through planning, I ended up focusing more on Africa than any other region. But I have literally served all over the world.
All over the world. Okay, that's good. At least we now know a little bit about the U.S. ambassador to our country. My first question, we've got a long-standing history about Liberia and the U.S., ranging as far back as maybe 1821 when the settlers came, or beyond. It depends on which historian you talk to. Now, how will you, maybe in few words or in few minutes, describe the current U.S.-Liberia's relations?
Current relations, I would say, are very close. We've sort of been influencing each other for 200 years, and we're still we're very strong partners at the United Nations. I would say Liberia votes with the United States at the UN more than any other country in Africa, and certainly I think our worldviews are very similar. We both have thriving media environments. We both believe very strongly in representational democracy, in free and clear elections, as we've seen in Liberia. So I think that those ties bring us together.
Mr. Ambassador, you also want to talk to us about your government's current priorities for Liberia?
Certainly. I would break that down into two different categories. As far as what our programming aims to do in Liberia, our greatest emphasis is on the healthcare sector.
Okay.
We spend about $77 million a year working with strengthening systems, improving the distribution of medicines, working with different aspects of the ministry, just to shore up what Liberia has, as opposed to trying to replace or put redundant systems in. So that's our number one priority, and fighting malaria, fighting HIV/AIDS, of course, fighting COVID. Our second priority is improving the education system. Working with teacher training, curriculum development, textbooks, creating textbooks especially for young readers. The theory is that if you can teach someone to read, then they can read and they can grow on their own. So the number one priority is to get people reading and reading early. So we've actually worked with Liberian authors to create these readers for first and second grade. Our third priority is in the area of what we call WASH, which is actually related to health because it involves water and sanitation, and the absolute importance of all of us learning to wash our hands regularly. Did you know that's the number one thing you can do? The number one thing that you can teach your children to do to not get sick is to wash your hands with clean water before eating and every time when you come into the house. It would make a huge difference.
Are these priorities you're talking about in the context of working with this current administration?
I would say that it's where we are today in our foreign assistance. Now, as far as U.S. government priorities for Liberia, I'm sure you wouldn't be surprised for me to tell you that both in my consultations with Congress before coming out and with my basic instructions from the department, and really a priority from the Biden administration, which he has raised actually to a national security priority, would be the fight against corruption. And some people ask why. Why am I so focused on corruption? And I think the best answer is to say that with all the resources that Liberia has, the mineral resources, your huge coastline, the number of ports you have, the agricultural possibilities, the dependable rains, all of that portends to a very, very wealthy, successful country. But unfortunately, the corruption, I see it like, salting a farmer's field.
Mr. Ambassador, we will come just there. We will talk a lot about governance issues in Liberia, corruption, rule of law. I was just trying to still wrap around the health sector. Now, thanks to the American government and people, you've been generous enough. When we wanted you during the peak of the coronavirus crisis in Liberia, America made intervention at different fronts, whether it was through the USA, whether it was through the WHO, and all these kinds of things. Considering the current level of progress we've made as a country in our fight against COVID-19, do you think we should have some policy change a little bit? Maybe talking about what people pay, to do COVID-19 tests, coming in country, leaving, and all those kinds of things.
Well, I see that the Ministry of Health is recalibrating. They're re-examining a number of aspects, for instance, requirements for entering or departing the country. As far as what people should pay, we were pleased to see an effort to communicate what monies were collected and where those monies were expended, although these weren't audited reports. But I think it's important to remember, even today, as testing for incoming flights is no longer required, but testing is still required for people leaving, as I understand it. It's important to remember that there are many associated costs with COVID tests. There's the staff that's doing the testing. There's, the logistics behind providing the testing equipment and the expendable supplies that need to be replaced every day, even down to printer ink and certificates and paper, and so all those things do cost overhead. It's not like it's free. It does cost money to run a testing service.
Okay. The last time you had a press conference with some Liberian journalists, and I remember at some point in time you used the word, you said it's a B. You were talking about $1 billion. Now, what is your overall impression with the performance of the Liberia Electricity Corporation, the LEC, and what are your recommendations, for example, to improve the performance and efficiency of the LEC? Because what is not a secret is that people are complaining about the form and manner in which electricity is moving.
Well, I am not an expert in the management of power companies, but I know enough to know that I'm very, very worried. I'm worried for the country of Liberia.
You are worried?
I'm very worried because LEC continues to lose massive amounts of money every day. And, the people in positions of power either want to have a country with steady electricity, steady and affordable electricity, or we're not concerned about it. But we can't be halfway. And so we either have to take power theft seriously or we have to not worry about it. But I can tell you, I don't see, if we don't take power theft seriously and if we don't make some decisions, important decisions about infrastructure, I just don't understand how the LEC will continue to operate.
You think we're not taking power theft seriously? We have a law, Mr. Minister, Mr. Ambassador, that provides that power theft is a major crime here.
Well, it's good. That was a good move to increase the penalties for power theft, and of course the prosecutors are busy with many other things. The criminal justice sector is underfunded, is struggling to do the best they can. But the fact is that we're not winning the battle yet, and that without a dependable, steady source of electricity, development will just always be beyond reach. Who are you going to attract to this country if you don't have dependable, reliable electricity? I don't know. As investors, unfortunately, I think the country needs to redouble its efforts and take power theft very seriously. Now, this could also involve other things, like maybe some kind of amnesty program, or but people have to turn the corner. They need to turn the corner on power theft, but that hasn't happened yet.
That hasn't happened yet. Now, when you were appointed and you had to go to Congress for confirmation, of course you went there. You were passionate about fighting against corruption in Liberia, Mr. Ambassador. Currently, what is the U.S. government's stance on corruption in Liberia, and what actions are you recommending or taking to ensure deterrence?
Right. And I would say the reason I'm so passionate is twofold. Number one, because, as I mentioned, the impact on Liberia. Liberia has so much potential, and to see it just frittered away through rampant corruption, it's sickening. Now, on the other hand, it's also not a good use of taxpayer funds that were, these weren't donations. This money was taken from American, people who are working for a living. The money was taken. If they don't pay their taxes, they're breaking the law. So this is money that was taken from American taxpayers and spent on programs in Liberia. So I have a responsibility if I see that the taxes aren't spent properly. But as far as what are we doing, and I try to remain more positive on this topic. I'd rather remain positive. For one thing, there's corruption everywhere. I guarantee you there's corruption in the United States. So it's not like we don't have a fight in the United States. But what are we doing? Well, one of the innovative things we're doing is in the health sector. We found this program that's a government-to-government reimbursement process. One of the big benefits is that it works directly with the counties. So the counties appreciate it because they don't have to wait for money to come from the central government. It's a direct reimbursement between our program and the county. We just added $55 million to this program this year. And we found that it works very, very well. So that's one thing we're doing. Another is, I don't know if you're aware that Liberia was selected from an exclusive group of countries to participate in the Summit for Democracy. And at the Summit for Democracy, every president, and President Weah was there. It was a virtual summit. Every government was given the opportunity to make pledges, and President Weah pledged various improvements in governance, which would very much improve the situation. And we look forward to seeing how the country implements these pledges. The next summit will be either December or maybe early 2023, and we're hoping that it will be in person. And all the countries that have actually followed through on their pledges with a good faith effort, made real attempts, concrete attempts to meet their pledges, will be invited to the next summit. So we think that's also a good program to improve that, the fight against corruption from that angle. And of course, there are also individual sanctions, as you've seen.
And we will also come there. Now, still on corruption, there have been many U.S. ambassadors to this country. Every time they talk about corruption, they're so passionate about U.S. government and people's money pumped into Liberia. And at some point in time, they think physically, in terms of on the ground, seeing these monies are not basing on the ground. Now, you're a very good partner to our country. You want to tell us from your perspective, is the issue of corruption people talk about in Liberia a perception? If it is not a perception, it's a reality. Why do you think Liberian governments are corrupt the way they are?
Well, I think you're right. It's completely fair and relevant to say that in this culture, corruption has been in this culture since the very beginning. And that's why I would say to people who happen to be in government right now, this is not personal. It's been a problem in Liberia for 200 years. And other countries that have faced the same issues at some point had to come to grips with the problem. I think if you look at the Asian tigers, what we call the tigers, even Singapore is a good example, is they had rampant corruption, and at some point, I believe it's the Prime Minister of Singapore took a sort of dual approach. Number one, he paid his officials what was at the time crazy salaries, just crazy, really, really high salaries. On the other side, he said, and if I catch you stealing, I will execute you. That's my understanding. So, but every society that has corruption, that has changed, has, again, turned some kind of corner where they just decided this was no longer acceptable as a society. For everyone who receives a bribe, someone has to be paying a bribe.
Mr. Ambassador, on the observance of the birthday of our first president, Joseph Jenkins Roberts, you issued a statement that went viral, and up to today, people are still talking about it. And you say, and I quote, if J.J. Roberts was alive today, your statement was applauded by many, and in some corner, others criticized the statement. First, can you tell me what motivated you or led you into issuing the statement, and have you seen efforts being made to address some of the concerns you raised in your statement? Could you have said the same thing you said in the statement in a much diplomatic language?
I thought about it for several weeks. I actually drafted it and then didn't show it to anyone for several weeks, and then cleared it inside with my team. And of all the critiques I've seen of it, which actually there haven't been very many, but the one criticism that hit home was, first of all, you called J.J. Roberts a great Liberian. Well, wasn't he also a great American? And I thought, well, shucks. When I wrote it, I actually said J.J. Roberts was a great American and a great Liberian, but I changed it when I put it through that process. I wish I had kept it, because he was a great American. And why was J.J. Roberts a great American? Because when he came here, the man had quite a lot of power. He's, part of the starting of a brand new country. He could have done anything. He could have been Dictator Roberts. He could have been King Roberts. He could have chosen any path he wanted. But, as fallible as all of us may be, and as fallible as our founding fathers may have been, they had ideals which lived through time, and which allowed the country to evolve through time. And like the United States, where we had to fight a civil war before we gave up slavery, I think Liberia had to go through the convulsions of your civil war to remove this elitist society that Liberia had been for so long. But the fact is, J.J. Roberts planted the seeds of democracy. None of us live our ideals perfectly, but at least we have the option of setting ideals and holding ourselves to those ideals. And I believe that J.J. Roberts did. So I wanted to come at the issue from the point of view of a partner, a friend, a neighbor, because people like to say, "Oh, the United States is the father of life." No.
You don't see it.
No, you're 175 years old. We're 17 years old, whatever. I can't remember exactly, but we're partners. We're neighbors. We're brothers. There's none of this father-child thing. No.
Ambassador Michael Mccarthy, before we move on to talk about justice and the rule of law, the UP-led government headed by Ellen Johnson Sirleaf earned a grant of US $257 million under the US government's Millennium Challenge Corporation Compact, which was used to rehabilitate the Mccarthy hydroelectric dam and upgraded its capacity from 64 megawatts pre-war status to about 88 megawatts. Is the U.S. government planning to extend similar MCC assistance to the CDC-led government, especially given the current power challenges in the country?
Well, when I was in Washington doing consultations before coming here, what I saw with MCC headquarters is that they're very big on Liberia. They would love to do another compact with Liberia, but the way the whole system has been set up from the beginning, it's a methodology which is unique to MCC. And the methodology says all the goodwill in the world will not bring you results for your investment unless you have the right prerequisites. So the prerequisites aren't like they're not like getting gold stars for being good. It's what it's saying is, unless enough of these prerequisites are where they need to be, the money you invest won't come up with any result. So that's why we have what's called the MCC scorecard every year, and these scores are not controlled by us. These scores are all, each one is done by a different organization. There's a health scores, there's a corruption score, there's an ease of doing business score, there's an inflation score, and unless the country is scoring at 10, unless they score above the required level for 10 of the 20 or more, then the methodology says your investment won't produce any result. Unfortunately, Liberia has hovered at 9 of the 20 prerequisites for 3 or 4 years now. Sometimes Liberia goes up on one and down on another, but you're always right close to passing the score. And passing the score, 10 of the 20, is an absolute minimum, right? So the country can't even be considered unless you've passed the scorecard. And really, you have to pass the scorecard a few years in a row so that the next year, after all the wheels start turning to do another compact, if Liberia doesn't pass the next year, then everything stops again. So but this is just a prerequisite. So the hope is, and there are areas where Liberia is doing better. Hopefully the scores will improve enough to pass the scorecard this year. That would be a very nice beginning.
Okay, Mr. Ambassador. Now, we are gradually transitioning into justice and some rule of law issues. Now, not too long ago, the U.S. government publicly announced the imposition of sanctions on Senator Prince Johnson for engaging in what the government called pay for play. You had previously taken similar action against Senator Vernon Sherman of Grand Cape Mount. Is the U.S. government planning to impose similar sanctions on the other Liberian government officials in the coming months? And is it true, Mr. Ambassador, that you've quietly started imposing sanctions on Liberian government officials now through unannounced visa denial?
I would not characterize any visa issues as sanctions. Those are all, each visa application is treated as a unique instance. So no, I would not connect that. And as far as the sanctions go, this program has only existed for, I think, since 2017. It's called the Magnitsky
Global Magnitsky Act.
Global Magnitsky Act. So it's a relatively new tool, and it's actually overseen by the Department of the Treasury, not by the Department of State. So it operates on its own, and I guess one thing I'd like to make clear is that the United States is, as I said, we have corruption in the United States. It's, you know, it's not that we're the kings of pure governance, but so we're not setting ourselves up as the sheriffs of corruption worldwide. It's not that kind of program. So what goes into someone being sanctioned? I'd say the two things that are the most important is egregious corruption, and when corruption starts to impact the operations of the democratic system, it starts to influence in a malign way the democratic system. Now, your country has an enviable democratic history at this point, and I think a lot of people will do what they need to do to help Liberia maintain that enviable system.
Are we at that level now?
Well, like as I said, it's a process that the Department of Justice goes through, but I think everyone feels strongly that we all want to support the democratic process in Liberia. You know, we work with the NEC, we work with civil society, we work with the media, and democracy only works when all the different parts are doing their job as well as they can. So, we worked with the legislature on better systems for governance. We work with different ministries, even the justice sector organizations of today were in many ways shaped by American trainees and programs since the end of the Civil War. And we feel that the National Police, for instance, are apolitical and professional. They could use a lot more funding, but we feel that the core belief systems among the police are professional and apolitical. We also see that trust in the police year on year, from last year to this year, has actually increased. And we think that's a good thing. The military, again, professional, apolitical, which is
the Liberian military.
The Liberian military, which is and highly respected by the Liberian citizens. So those will bolster democracy. Okay. Those are very good things.
Let's talk a little bit about the recently released U.S. State Department Human Rights Report on Liberia, Mr. Ambassador. How are these reports generated?
That's a great question, and thank you for asking that. Clarence, this is an annual process, and it's required by Congress, by our Congress. So every year, we are required to publish, and it's not a secret document. We're required to publish in open view to anyone in the world who wants to read it every year on every country. And so we use the same measures around the world, and the office in the State Department that compiles these reports, that office works with us in the field. So we collect information all year long, often from the media, often from court cases, often from our own reports, and together we fashion the words for the next year's report. But the part of the State Department that writes these reports is very independent. They will not be influenced by us in the field if they think that we're trying to advocate too strongly, or if we're misinterpreting something that happened. So they actually hold the pen. So it's a process. It's a worldwide process, And what we see it as is a tool that countries can use to improve, because no country is perfect. And we always say democracy is a work in progress. So this is a tool that countries can use to say, well, okay, where can we do better this year? And actually, I think, well, also achieving and approving, protecting human rights, of course, is always a top goal for every administration, U.S. administration. But one area where we think this, the criticism of last year's Human Rights Report, where it paid benefits this year, is in the area of trafficking in persons. We're very pleased. We also do an annual trafficking in persons report. And unfortunately, last year, Liberia went down from what we call Tier 2 to Tier 2 watch list, which was not a place any country wants to be. But when that happened, as with the Human Rights Report, which mentioned tip issues, what happened is it galvanized the government of Liberia. And the Ministry of Justice had always been concerned about trafficking in persons and using what resources they have to fight it. But what really happened is the Minister of Labor got very involved and invested. The administration put money into it, gave the Ministry of Labor money for prosecutions, and working with the legislature, they passed laws which had been sort of sitting around for a while, which would bring Liberia into harmony with trafficking in persons laws around the world, which was one of the things that we were calling for. So the legislature quickly passed the new legislation. The president signed the legislation very quickly. Then the Ministry of Labor worked quickly to implement aspects of the new laws. And what you saw was with these women who were trafficked to Oman, then the Ministry of Foreign Affairs jumped in, and they all worked together. The thing is, you saw a concerted effort, everyone focused on the same goal, and they achieved really impressive results. So the Ministry of Foreign Affairs brought these victims back to Liberia. Then the Ministry of Justice, working with the Ministry of Labor, prosecuted the traffickers. They actually had a court case, so the judiciary got involved. There is a court case, and the jury found them guilty, and they've been sentenced. Well, that's the kind of action that can happen when all the ministries work together, when the government's working the way it should. And it's really quite impressive, and we've been very pleased to see that.
Former Liberian President Charles Taylor, now in a British prison, would say, no Liberian president would succeed if you do not visit Washington. He says that. Now, given the special relationship between Liberia and the U.S., Mr. Ambassador, many past presidents of our country were invited, by sitting U.S. presidents to visit the White House. However, since the acceptance of President George Weah, he has not yet been seen paying an official visit to Washington. Ambassador, do you foresee any invitation to President Weah before the end of his 6-year tenure? Is there anything Liberia needs to do, to attract those kinds of invitations to Washington?
Well, I wouldn't put too much emphasis on a physical visit, but what I would say is absolutely that as long as the Weah administration makes a good faith effort to meet the pledges that he made at the Summit for Democracy, he will be invited to be in person at the next Summit for Democracy. But I would back up a little bit, and I would say to be a successful president isn't to listen to Washington, it's to listen to the needs of your people. And anything that a president can do to hear and act on the needs of the people is going to make that president a huge success.
Except that, on many occasions in Liberia, there is this general perception that when a Liberian president is invited to Washington, for example, see President, we are in photo with President Joe Biden at the White House, discussing diplomatic issues and those kinds of things. We Liberians back home would say, yes, we got it. We got it, you know.
Well, the president had a photo with President Biden in Scotland. So, I mean, he's met briefly with him, and as I said, as long as he follows through on the Summit for Democracy pledges, he will be there at the summit. And it's a select group of countries. It's not every country was invited at all. So
I like that. Now we'll move on. Then we'll take phone call. Let's talk about elections in Liberia. Next year, we will be going to elections. And are you following the different political issues in the country? Whether the CPP issue at the National Elections Commission, Alexander Cummings in court, and all these things, Mr. Ambassador. Are you following? Are you at some point in time getting concerned about particular issues as we move to elections next year?
Well, you know, every election cycle is another chance for the electorate to sort of crystallize what their priorities are, and a chance for all politicians to review those crystallized needs and decide what their best response will be. So, you know, are we watching it? Of course, we're watching it very closely. As far as the political system itself in Liberia, I think there are some interesting discussions about should there be reform so that the NEC is not required to rule on certain issues. Instead, it should go to the courts. And should the courts have to rule on every issue, or should they be allowed to say, no, this doesn't rise to the level of... so those are interesting developments. I know at the inauguration of the new legal organization of Liberia, when Tiawan Konglos finished his term, and they
the Liberia National Bar Association.
That one,
yeah,
LMBA. The vice president, Vice President Taylor, said that she felt that it was important to change the rules, the law. She wanted the legislature to change the law, or to massage the law in elections before 2023, because she felt that the last election cycle showed that some of these mechanisms are cumbersome. People can just slow down the process by coming up with accusations. And I found that to be an interesting comment on her part.
What do you think about that? You think we need to change some of the laws ahead of elections?
Well, I hesitate to say as an outsider, but I think as an outsider, I find it interesting that some of the things that NEC is asked to rule on do seem to be legal issues, and then some of the things that the courts are asked to rule on in the U.S. would be considered internal party issues. They wouldn't be legal issues, I don't think. But I'm not a lawyer, so I really I shouldn't venture a guess.
And I must publicly say, thanks to the U.S. government, thanks to the U.S. Embassy, most of the time when there are public issues that bother us on Rumen, we will communicate with the embassy, and the embassy has always been generous to us, giving us information as part of efforts not to deceive our listeners and the Liberian people. Now, for me today, it's an opportunity, to host the U.S. ambassador. I mean, who I believe have got understanding about all of the issues, Liberia-America relationship. Now, it's been reported, and I'd like to squarely ask you this one, Mr. Ambassador, I'm sorry. It's been reported that the wife of our foreign minister, Maxwell Kimeyat, has left the U.S. after your government declared her personal neglector. Do you have a sexual harassment case in the U.S. against foreign minister Maxwell Kimeyat? Can he travel to the U.S. without being arrested?
Boy, those are a lot of things like jammed into one question. I would say all of those are Washington or New York-based issues, and we really have no response to that. If I would ask in Washington whether that's true or whatever. I really can't respond to any of that. So
was his wife actually told to leave the States?
I would say you'd have to ask in Washington or New York. I can't say that. Luckily, I'm only responsible for U.S. interests in Liberia.
I'm just thinking if the ambassador, cannot respond to that, I'm not sure. Is there any way we can get response to that? Through what? What do we do?
I guess have reporters in Washington or New York ask the question, because we wouldn't know about that kind of thing. And visa issues are also private; they have privacy concerns, so we wouldn't really be aware.
Someone would say if those things were false, the ambassador would say, all right, he would say, no, that's not true.
No, that's not so. I'm those are Washington and New York issues, so I don't cover them.
Okay, you want to talk a little bit about the road fund, the funds generated, from roads and all these kinds of things, and that would trickle down to usage of county development fund to support local government authorities. Then we can take some calls.
Sure. The road fund. Okay, here's the thing about building things. Okay, we tend to think of things as being, there's nothing there, and then you build it, and then it's there, right? That's not how things are. Things, all of them are almost more like living organisms. Buildings, airport terminals, the ministerial complex, roads, all of these things, when you create them, you must make a commitment to maintaining them. Without that commitment, it will have entropy. It will decay. It's just, that's nature. You can't fight it. So when the Millennium Challenge Compact was presented to Liberia, the government agreed as a condition to, if we're going to build any roads, and our first compact that we proposed was almost all on roads. It wasn't about Mount Coffee. Okay. We said we'll build these roads if the government agrees to create what we call the Road Maintenance Fund. And the Road Maintenance Fund is funded by a tax on fuel imports into Liberia. So it's taxed at the point of entry. And that way the consumer is paying it, but they're paying it, when they pay the retailer for the fuel. The retailer's already paid the wholesaler, and the wholesaler paid the tax. Okay? So it's normal in most countries for big users of roads to pay a higher tax. Like trucks in the United States are weighed, and they pay a tax on their use of the road based on the weight of the truck, because that's doing the most wear and tear on the road. Having agreed to establish this fund, the government of Liberia did start collecting the duties. But the problem is the fund is supposed to be transparent. It's as with all other things with public monies, because this money belongs to the citizens of Liberia, it's supposed to be transparent. So there should be records of all the funds that were collected, and then, as with all expenditures by the government of Liberia, the expenditures are supposed to be appropriated by the legislature. Only the legislature can appropriate funds, and then should be expended within the rules of contracting that govern public contracting in Liberia, and then should be transparently explained each year. How did we spend the funds? For instance, how many miles or how many kilometers of road were constructed? What were the contracts? Were the contracts sole source, or were they competed? What was the full amount? How much money is left? But those things are not. I have tried since I got here to find this kind of report, and I've not succeeded. So for all state-owned enterprises, I think it's really incumbent for good governance to put all the revenues of state-owned enterprises The revenues need to go to the legislature and be appropriated just like all other public monies, because the money doesn't belong to the SOE. The money belongs to the people of Liberia.
The money belongs to the people of Liberia. You were very blunt at some point in time when you referred to Monrovia the way you did. Has anything changed?
I have seen some. I've seen some officials referring to new approaches, and I know there are some days when I go and it seems like the city is a little cleaner. And I know there was a campaign, I think 2 weeks ago, by a youth group. So I find that, I was happy to see some impact. I think it's important for people to take pride in their city. I think in the States, we took a while. We had to have a campaign to make people feel shame about littering. There was even a famous ad on TV, which I remember from when I was a kid, of a Native American who's looking at this trash and a tear is coming down his face because he's saying, "What have you done to the country that we gave you or that you took from us?"
Well, it's a pleasure today to have with us U.S. Ambassador accredited near Capital, Mccarthy. This is the OK Morning Rush. So we use 7 minutes to talk to you and then 3 other minutes for the ambassador to respond to some of the comments, and then you wrap up. Listen, when you call, I'm not interested in you going all around. Just be exact, be respectful, ask your questions, and talk the issues. Listen to the numbers. For those of you outside of Liberia, just go on our page. You will have the opportunity to call. Other than that, you call 0770. All the lines are already on. 0770-942-817-0886. I encourage the women to use this line exclusively. 0886-458-902-555-995-995. Our first caller is, I'm sure, from Paris in France. Hello?
Good morning, Clarence. Good morning to your studio guest. My name is Frank Gibson, and I call from Paris. And just for the record, every statement I will make here represents Frank Gibson, and Frank Gibson takes responsibility for every statement that he made thereof. Mr. Ambassador, the United States has done a lot of good to Liberia in terms of development, but it's equally also good to be known that the United States has done a lot of damage, destruction to Liberia than good. That goes to sponsoring war, coup, regime change that destroyed all fabrics of the Liberian society. The United States were in contact with Prince Johnson that you are now going to sanction today, that captured President Doe and killed him subsequently. The United States is also part of the war that led rebel launched on President Charles Taylor, who is now in prison in England, to unseat President Taylor's government. My question to you, Mr. Ambassador, as a representative of the United States of America to Liberia, will you take responsibility of the death of the 300,000 Liberians that died for the Liberian Civil War?
Okay, thank you, Frank. Frank, thank you. You've made your points. Let's go directly. We have to take other callers. Thank you. Let's keep it saver. Hello.
Good morning, Clarence.
Good morning, sir.
Clarence, my name is Pony. I'm popularly known as Irresistible Pony, and I speak from Bushwa Island.
Let's go straight to the issue. He's listening.
Mr. Ambassador, I want to thank you for coming to our popular program, OKFM. And I want to thank you for always unveiling yourself to the press and speaking on those issues that affect our country. I think the United States have been a good brother or friend to Liberia. Like you said, we shouldn't say father or elder brother. I'd like to appreciate you. Basically, I got one question for you, Mr. Ambassador. Do we see sanction? Because your story on accountability have been very strong. I follow you most of the time when you speak. You reference accountability. Do we look forward to sanction on our public official, whether from the Magnitsky or from where? And then why you people continue to give money if in your own understanding that those money have been mismanaged and misappropriated?
Thank you. The ambassador is jotting down point. He will respond. Take more calls here. Hello.
Morning, Clarence.
Good morning.
Thank you. And I'm Musa Kone.
Yep.
And I want to say good morning to the ambassador.
Mm-hmm.
I admire him a lot. Listening to his conversation with you And he showed to me that yes, he actually spent 32 years in the foreign service.
Okay.
He tried to be very simple, and I think he spoke or speaking to the audience. I think every other Liberian can actually get, and I admire him for that. And I just want to say thank you, and we look forward to a better or stronger, more relationship with you as a person and in general the American people. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Musa. Let's cross here. Hello. Good morning. You're live.
Yes, thank you, Clarence. You can shut on F2.
Yeah.
Morning from my old resident.
Go straight to the issue.
Let me say good morning to your ambassador. I think I listened to your ambassador very clearly. He actually stressed on the issue of corruption. But one thing the ambassador said, which I agree with, is the issue of corruption in this country is not just that big. It has been an old age problem. But I don't really want to know what the police said, because those people know very well that the issue of corruption is all.
Sheldon, just ask the question. I want to take other callers, please.
So, Mr. Ambassador, you know very well that corruption has been, in this country, and people continue to give money. But my question is, what are you doing to curtail corruption when you...
Thank you. What are you doing to curtail corruption in Liberia? That's the question. Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir. Call your name and
Good morning to the ambassador in there.
straight to the issue.
Hello.
Archie, go ahead.
Let me extend thanks to him for his passion for Liberia. What he has exhibited, I don't even see our national leader exhibiting what he has done regular on the radio. But my question goes to him. Our respect to corruption. NACC has indicted so many public officials. And as we speak, these public officials still serving in their public position. The president who vowed to fight corruption, and he has not been able to take any decision with respect to suspension or dismissal. At the end result...
Archie, can you just ask the question? We're chasing less than 5 minutes, sir.
Okay. So, what is the effort that will mount pressure on the president to live up to his commitment and respect to the fighting corruption when he actually indicts?
Okay, thank you. What is America doing to mount pressure on we are government to ensure the fight against government is a reality? That's the question. Hello?
Yeah, good morning,
Yeah, call your name. Let's hear you.
Yeah, my name is Prince Corey. I come from district number 16.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to add the ambassador, in Liberia, the issue of corruption.
Oh my
in
God.
our country is out there, this government alone. They have started from the trouble administration. So what are the plans America is putting into place?
Thank you, my brother. Oh, everybody's concerned. What is America doing? Well, let me take the final call. Ambassador, we have to conclude in time. Hello? Finally.
Good morning, Mr. Jackson.
Good morning.
And our distinguished U.S. ambassador. I want to applaud you first for at least highlighting some issues with regard to Liberia. But I would like to go on the other side of my colleague, directors. One, I would like to know what are those little things that with regard to interview pertaining to Liberia, other men successful, but only because of the interview they have spent thousands of dollars, some of them even...
You are talking about diversity visa.
Yeah, diversity visa. Yeah, at the end of the day, some of them get frustrated after...
You are asking why are some Liberians denied? That's your question.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you. Let's go back to the minister. I apologize to all of you. We could not take every call. We're chasing time here. We should be ending exactly 10 o'clock. Ambassador?
Clarence, I think I mentioned that there was one person who critiqued my op-ed and who I felt was particularly strong. And the first one was that J.J. Roberts was a great American. His second critique, which is reflected in many of these phone calls, he said, if you give someone money and they steal it 1 year, and then you give them the same money again next year and they steal it again, and then you do it again a third year, whose fault is that really? Is that really the person who's stealing the money? And I think that's a fair accusation or a fair question. And I think the answer to that it comes in this new mechanism that we're using now with the Ministry of Health. I think by continuing to give the money, but only as a reimbursement, that we've cut out many of the problems that we were facing under previous mechanisms. So what we're trying to do is use the same methodology in other areas. And I would also say that other partners of ours have looked at how we're doing this and would also like to replicate the same kind of methodology. It's a way of allowing our generosity to continue, but without having to repeat the same mistakes as the past. Now, I should also mention that the vast majority of our assistance goes through civil society organizations, and those organizations, they follow certain auditing and oversight requirements. So overall, I would say I agree. If you keep doing the same thing and getting the same result, it's on you. It's not on everybody else necessarily. So we are trying to take a different approach. What we're also doing is, we keep beating the bushes about the problem, and we keep bringing up the LEC issues, so that it will remain a high-profile problem in the public discussion. But if I could conclude on a different note, Clarence, sometimes I fear that Liberians don't fully appreciate and understand that a reasonable person in 2003, looking forward 20 years, would have no reason to expect that Liberia would be doing as well as Liberia is doing today. Sometimes we should stop and appreciate how far things have come. I've heard descriptions of Monrovia from 2003, 2004. This city has been rebuilt. The society, the institutions, Liberia is doing very well compared to where it might have been in 2003. Let me also say that the media here is an environment which is something to be treasured. I've lived in many, many, many countries that do not have a free media like you do here. And while you have it, use it. Media, keep everybody honest. That's your job. But you also have responsibilities of your own. But the people need to appreciate the media that you have today. It's something to be treasured and protected.
Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much for honoring our invitation. We've been doing this back and forth, and I'm happy that you were able to honor our invitation. And I also want to publicly say thanks to the American government and people, because as a U.S. fellow myself, benefiting from your resources of your country, I like to say thank you. I benefited from the international campaigns program and the Edo Maroon program for journalists. And I want to publicly say thanks to the American government and people. Thank you so much for coming, Ambassador.
Thank you, Clarence. Thank you very much.
Well, U.S. Ambassador to Liberia, Mccarthy was our guest here. Thanks to all of you, Liberia. He says, look, we need to appreciate our own. We need to appreciate the Liberian media. We need to appreciate ourselves as a nation and people. Keep those words. I'm out of here. Guys, waiting tomorrow morning. I'll be back here. Thanks to all of you who called. If you called, you didn't go through, it was not deliberate. I'm out of here. My name is P. So thanks to Jude Rare, and thanks to the U.S. Public Affairs Section, Robert Clark and his bosses, for always being generous to some of our inquiries. Bye-bye.